So, getting back, and the Beis Hamikdash, you're not allowed to use chametz. So the breads are breads that are baked in 18 minutes or less. And there's only 2 times that chametz is used in the Beis Hamikdash. One of them is Shavuos, that there's like to show that Shavuos came in, there's like a humongous loaf of challah that's put on the wall of the Beis Hamikdash, and that's how we show that Shavuos came in. And the other time, I think there's one type of when we bring breads, and one type of the karbanas that it is chametz, but otherwise there's no chametz. Right, so the showbreads, the lechem aponim that are put on the special shulchan, the table that had the showbreads, those breads are not chametz. So this is interesting, Think about a woman's career, the times of the Beis Hamikdash, she could be baking all day, having the time of her life, So the question is, right? Think about the shulchan. How do you have lechem, bread for the shulchan, if there is no? How do you have lechem aponim if there is no wheat in the desert? So many things that we could ask with different situations that to be Makai mitzvahs, or they're part of a carbon, part of a mitzvah, or Shabbos. Let's say Shabbos is supposed to have breads, like all these things. So how do you have these? At certain times that it's maybe not a chiyuv, but it's people have sudas. Let's say sudas Rosh Chodesh, they have bread. They want to wash on Rosh Chodesh. It's not a chiyuv, but it shows cover to the day. So how do they do all this if they did not have? If all they had was the man? Now remember, the man had an interesting aspect to it, that usually when a person eats, right, the body takes the toiv, and then gets the psilus is moved out, right? You have the vitamins that we take, the good stuff, and then there's this extra part that is not needed. However, spiritual food, 100% spiritual food, like the man, that does not have any psilus. There's no need to go to the bathroom, because it's nivla be'varm. It goes into it literally goes into the bones, into everything, and it's only good. There's nothing that, it's just better. So, that's why Klal Yisrael, there wasn't a need to eat a lot, because the man you needed the portion that you needed, depending on how big and how much you eat, in a normal, healthy way, and then that was it. You didn't need anything else. You were satiated. Imagine having spiritual food coursing through your body. I just can't imagine how that would change a person's day. So this was the man. So the man was absolutely amazing, and in the Baal HaTurim actually brings that there is a bracha that you make for man. Remember, if you eat something, you will make a bracha. You have to bless Hashem, thank Hashem for that. If you smell a good smell, you bless Hashem for that. So when it comes to smell, if it's a natural smell, then there's different brachas depending on what it is. If you don't know, you could just say, Bari Mina B'Samim, which is used for everything. There's a big question about artificial smells. Could you make Bari Mina B'Samim? Since we don't know, it's good that before you take an artificial smell, you say thank you Hashem, and you smell it. So here we come, and we have what happens. We have the special one, but what about all the mitzvahs that we need with lechem, that we need to do with lechem? So let's see. Now this is a question in the Rishonim. I'm not going to say each thing, because it would make things take very long. We're trying to get like a overall view as opposed to the nitty gritty. But you can look in the Sefer and you can look it up in the different Rishonim on when it in Parshat Saman and all this, and you could learn all. You could see the whole sugya. So the Chida brings from one of the early. So the Chida in Sefer Nachal Kidumen brings. He brings from Rabbeinu Ephraim, who brings from one of the first Geonim. Remember, the Geonim are after the Amoraim. So this is one of the first Geonim, people that were very close to when Amoras lived. Or it could be that Amoras were living, meaning there's a time that you have both. You have Amoram, but now the new Talmid Chacham cannot become Amoram, and now they are Geonim. So there could be at that time even Amoram that are still living when this person is speaking. And he's saying that from the man they made seeds, gar'ine chita, megoivel ki'isa she'esh by mayim harbe. So then they would mush a lot of water in it. Remember, they had the clouds. The clouds, and they also had the Ber Shamilium. That's more, They had the Ber Shamilium that went with them. That's really where they got the water from. And he says, and that's how they would bring menachos v'lechem hapanim. Right? We're talking about this with the menachos. There's v'lechem hapanim. That's how they would do it. Now, maybe the omer they couldn't bring, but then this they would. So the question is, the obvious question is that, I'll make a joke, but it's for us to understand. But like you take matzah and then you make matzah meal, and then you take the matzah meal and you start, baking things, so to speak, right? So this is like they turn the man into some type of crushed, they crushed it into fine, dak, and then they would use that. So it's like taking rice and crushing it and then making rice bread. Like they crushed it until it could be used like a flour. So, and he says that's what they would use. So the obvious question is, it's still not flour. It's still not flour. So it could be that two answers could be. It could be that due to the circumstance that was the best that they could do. So then you could say, well, then could you just crush anything and use it? Well, the man was special because the man wasn't just like any other food you could find in the world. This was, down here on the earth. This was the food of angels, a special type of food. So they felt that is different than just crushing, let's say, they didn't. It's different than crushing other things and making it. This is man. This is holy food, and that's what they used. So now, that's an answer. But now let's go and let's learn a little bit the Gemara that talks about. I'm sure the Gemara talks about the mud, right? The famous, right? We're all taught, and it's one of the shittas in the Gemara, that the mud took the taste of whatever a person thought. Let's say he wanted to taste pizza, he tasted pizza. It tasted like whatever he wanted to taste, except for 7 machalim, 7 types of tastes. And these foods are, the reason why it didn't taste like it is because these foods are harmful for a woman in childbirth. So there's 5 things. There's kishuim, avatichem, that chatzir, habtsalim, hashumim. Now you have to remember, some of I know today we call avatichem, we call watermelon. I don't know if that's if they're just using that word, if that's a correct translation. So you have to really look into each thing. But some of them we do know, right? Shumim is garlic. Bitzalim is onions. And shum avatichim is certain types of melons. There's certain types of melons that are not good for women when they're in childbirth. Vesachatzir. So these are different things. So those 5 tastes it did not have. But any other taste that you could think of, it was able to taste like it. So we go into in Masechtes Yuma, Daf Ayin Hey Amud Aleph, and it brings over there a machlokes amirot. One sheet that says Shebnei Yisrael tamu b'man taman u'mamashan, that they had the taste and the feel. What does that mean? That the food would change into what you think. So if you thought of pizza, the man would change into a spiritual pizza. As funny as that sounds. If you thought of a milkshake, the man would change into a spiritual milkshake. It would be a milkshake, but it wouldn't be like a regular milkshake you have. This would be, echt, The man would change. So this is a new sheet that a lot of us might not have heard, but it's a machlokes in the Gemara, and this is one sheet says this, and another sheet says over there what we said before. So according to the sheet that the man would change into the food that you thought about, so now the question sort of goes away. Why? Because they had matzahs for Pesach, because they thought that they want a matzah, and a matzah appeared. So they had matzahs, and let's say they wanted to make a hadama, they thought of a certain type of hadama food, and then they can make hadama. And if they wanted to make the bracha on the man itself, ha'motzi lechem min hashamayim, that's what the Baal Tum brings, is the bracha they made on the man, bracha ta Hashem, ha'motzi lechem min hashamayim. So then they would do that. So this sheet is very easy, but the other sheet is still shver. So here we bring the Even Ezra, which he gives a different answer according to the shita that it only had the taste. He says that taka, since they did not have matzahs, they couldn't eat matzahs. That's what he says. He says since they didn't have matzahs, they couldn't eat matzahs. And the mitzvahs that are pertaining to the mitzvahs that are pertaining that when you need breads and you need all these things, they weren't able to do. Why? Because they did not have it. Oinus Rachmana Patre. If a person is in a situation that he cannot, well, in this case it wasn't, chas v'shalom, but they're in a situation, whether for a good reason or a bad reason, that they cannot perform a mitzvah. They have a mitzvah to say, do such and such. They cannot do it. Let's say they're chained. They cannot do it. Then they're pater. They're exempt. So this is what the Even Ezra says. However, we have a question on the Even Ezra. What's the question? Because the Tosfos in Chulin, Daf Peches Amud Beis, Dibur Amaskal Ella, he writes there that all the days Klal Yisrael were in the Midbar was able to be Megadal Tzmachim, was able to grow forth flowers. So Klal Yisrael would encamp in a place, and all of a sudden flowers would start to grow. So the Ananei HaKavod had an ability that wherever it was, and Klal Yisrael was in the Ananei HaKavod, that ground underneath became fertile, and you were able to grow things. So if that's the case, then why didn't Klal Yisrael plant? They could have planted, saved some of the seeds that they brought with them, and planted. And that's how they could have matzahs and the lechem apanim, and bring the omer, v'chule v'chule. This is a very strong question on the Even Ezra. So, yesh li yashev, there's a way to answer this, and that is that, remember, al pi Hashem yachanu v'al pi Hashem yisod. According to the word of Hashem they encamped, and according to the word of Hashem they went. And how would that happen? Very interesting. Look at the Medrash explaining how this whole thing would happen. It's actually very, very interesting. So what would happen is when Hashem wanted them to move, or wanted them to, so what would happen is that there would be like a cloud of glory that would come on top of the Mishkan, and that cloud would show that Hashem wants to go. Moshe Rabbeinu would go in to hear what Hashem had to say, because sometimes it would mean it's time to go. Sometimes it would be Hashem wants to tell him something, and that's how he would. Because once they made the Mishkan, then Moshe Rabbeinu stopped speaking to Hashem wherever he was. Meaning, before the Mishkan was built, wherever Moshe Rabbeinu was, he could start speaking to Hashem. But after the Mishkan was built, Moshe Rabbeinu would have to go into the Kodesh HaKadoshim to speak. Would go into the Oil Moed to speak with Hashem. He would still be panim al panim, but now it wouldn't be just wherever he is, except I guess if Hashem wanted to. Usually that's the way it would be after the Mishkan was made. So that's how they would know to stop. So Moshe Rabbeinu would go, and then Hashem would say, travel. And now, Tziva Hashem, al pi Hashem yachnu, al pi Hashem. So they would start traveling. And when the cloud would, and then it would subside, and people would be going with the other clouds, but not the cloud of the Shekhinah. And then when Hashem wanted to stop again, it would come, the Shekhinah cloud would come up, a separate cloud besides the other clouds that were around them. And that, Moshe Rabbeinu would go there, and he would speak. He would speak panim el panim with Hashem, and then they would stop. Hashem would say stop, and then he would stop. He said, "Okay, Klai, it's time to stop." Now the Medrash says that they had a very in sync system of moving, and there's you have all the Shvatim encamped around the Mishkan, and there's many halachas that we learn for Tchumen and Eruvs, and Eruvs were made later, but certain aspects Eruv, I believe, was made by Shlomo Melech. So there was many but there was this encampments, and the Levium would be the Kohanim, and the Levium would be, close nearby the Mishkan, and there was Machne Shechina, Machne Kahuna, Machne Levia, Machne Yisrael, and this was, I believe, the Kahuna and Levia, they were together, so it would be Shechina, Levia, and then it would be Yisrael. And this was, when they would move, everybody knew that when that person starts to pack up his tent, when he's halfway through, then I start. And then when that next person is halfway through, then I start. They had a system. I don't know, if that's exactly. I'm just trying to give an example. They had a system how everybody, basically, you would see in a nation 600,000 people. Well, it was more like at least 3 million, because that would just men between the ages 20 to 60, and then you have women, and then so we're talking about it could be 5 million, 10 million, at least 3 million, not less than 3 million people, and then they would travel, and everybody would be such a sync. Like sometimes you see like the people, they have these people that do drums and they spell out words as they move, or in stadiums they pick up these flyers and it spells. So basically, if you would had a bird eye's view, you would see like everything just like being bundled, like just like into like knapsacks, so to speak, or on their they had cattle with them, so on their sheeps and donkeys, and then they would go, like everything would be like an amazing thing, like like watching those dances when they make when they're making letters and spelling out things, and you have hundreds of people moving in sync. It's absolutely amazing. So this is even more. This is not just moving around. This is moving many things. You're moving your house. Everybody's getting in position to move, to start walking. And then, so you have to also calculate, because remember, if the person's in front, the person in back has to start at a later. You can't start at the same place, because then he'll bump into the first. So it has to be a system. So it was an amazing sight to see. So where were we? So we want to answer this Gemara in the Tosfos in Chulin, that since there was no set time they didn't know how long they were going to be in a place. Some places it could be a day, some places it could be a few years. They didn't know how long it was going to be. So because they did not know when they're going to travel, perhaps they did not plant, because once they go, then anything they planted would disappear because of the desert. It would lose the ruchnius, the spirituality would move from this intense ruchnius of the Nana covered, would move on, and then the ground, it would just die, whatever was there. So that's another answer why they did not plant. So these are different ways to answer this. Very, very interesting. I want to go on the word man. It's amazing, Lashon Kodesh, how the symmetry of it. It's Adein Shir, Adein Soif. So in the Shilas and Shulas of the Chassam Sofer, so he brings. He says, why when God forbid, Chas v'Shalom, a woman loses her husband, the woman is called an almana, and why when a man, God forbid, Chas v'Shalom, loses his wife, he's called an alman. Right? We all know what garish and grush is. We're not getting into that. We're talking about healthies. Unfortunately, they lost their spouse. So, I do meet people that did get divorced, and they did fight a lot, but they do feel, after everything was done and they stopped speaking to each other, whatever it is, they do both, each one of them feels, even if the woman stole the kids, the woman also, they both feel that they're almana, they're an alma, that their spouse just died, and we sometimes have to appreciate what we have a little more and fight for it more. So the Chassam Sofer says, why is it almana and alman? So he says that man, the word man, right? We know it refers to the special food in Shemayim, but man also it refers to hachanas mazon, preparing food. That's what man, if you wanted to say a sophisticated way in Lashon Kodesh to say, preparing food, you would say man. No? So now there are two ways to say no in Lashon Kodesh. There's loy and al. What is the difference? Loy means don't. Al means please don't. That's why when we say to Hashem, al tashlicheni le'ezikna, Please, it's please Hashem, do not forsake me in my old age. We don't say loy tashlicheni because that would be disrespectful. It's like a command. It's like telling someone what to do. Rather, we say al tashlicheni. We asking Hashem. We're not telling Him. We're asking Him. Please don't forsake us in our old age. So, al means please don't. So, almana means a woman that lost her man. She lost the person that would provide for her food. Right? Then food is, and alman is that the husband lost the person that helps bake the food and helps in the preparation of food, right? There's different aspects in making food, and food is one of the things that brings people together, right? It's mekareves halavavos. It's what Chazal say. It's something that brings people together and makes friendships. And in the process of making bread, there are aspects that men like to do or women like to do, and sometimes, it overlaps. But the process of bread is a process that you need men and women to have the plowing, and to have a woman do all that. I know today we have machineries, but to have a woman do all those things, plowing and taking care of the oxes and getting them to plow and this and that, very strenuous for a woman. She's not built for that. However, to bake and to smell things and understand what to put in to make this type of bread and that type of bread, onion bread, cinnamon bread, and right, they do amazing jobs. And each people have different things that they do in bread and food, and together we have food because of the man and because of the woman. So losing a loved one is losing the person, is losing that connection, because the food represents connection, because food makes connection. Food is something that makes people connected in its produce, in its baking, in every aspect, and therefore, and eating it together, right? If people are alone and there's no food, right? Things, fights could break out, right? So, food is, but when there's food, all of a sudden, you don't have fights, and you have friendships are created. So this is an amazing thing about food, and that's why it's called almana and alman, because they lost their sustenance, their physical sustenance, their spiritual sustenance, of connection. Right? Connection is like a half spiritual, half physical, right? It's in this in-between quasi state. They lost it. And that's what alman and almana mean. So now we understand, this is from the Chassam Sofer. Amazing lessons here, amazing things we learn. Mitzvah Hashem, we should continue to see the Oitzer Ployes HaTorah, the wondrous, treasure, the wondrous treasures of the Torah. All the brachas. Have a wonderful night.